Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the military academy's rooftop, her hands trembling as she looked down at the concrete courtyard 30 feet below. The autumn wind whipped through her dark hair, and she could hear the cruel laughter of the three male cadets behind her. They had cornered her up here after evening mess, claiming they wanted to show her something special about the academy's history. "What's wrong, Martinez? Scared of heights?" sneered Jake Thompson, the ringleader of the group. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. His father was a decorated general, and Jake wore that legacy like armor. "I thought all the tough girls could handle a little wind." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she remained silent. At 5 feet 4 inches and weighing barely 120 pounds, she looked fragile next to the three hulking cadets. Her slight frame had been a constant source of mockery since she arrived at Preston Military Academy 3 months ago. What her tormentors didn't know was that beneath her quiet exterior lay years of training and experience that would make seasoned soldiers pause. "Maybe we should help her get a better view," suggested Marcus Reed, Jake's loyal follower. He cracked his knuckles menacingly. Marcus had been kicked out of 2 previous schools for bullying, but his family's political connections had secured him a spot at Preston. "I hear the view from the edge is spectacular." The third cadet, Tommy Walsh, shifted nervously. Unlike his companions, Tommy came from a working-class family and had earned his place through academic merit. He was smaller than the others and often went along with their schemes to avoid becoming a target himself. "Maybe we should just leave her alone, guys. If someone sees us up here—" "Shut up, Walsh," Jake snapped. "Nobody's going to see anything. The instructors are all in their weekly meeting, and the other cadets are studying. It's just us and little Sarah here." He took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You know what your problem is, Martinez? You think you belong here. You think you're as good as us." Sarah finally turned to face them, her dark eyes steady despite the fear she felt. She had learned long ago to control her expressions, to never show weakness to predators. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said quietly. "I just want to finish my education and serve my country." Jake laughed harshly. "Serve your country? You can barely carry your own pack during morning exercises. What makes you think the military needs someone like you?" He gestured to his companions. "Show her what we think about weaklings at Preston." The 3 cadets began to advance on her, their intentions clear. Sarah's mind raced as she calculated her options. The rooftop was isolated, with only one stairwell leading down. The cadets blocked her path to safety, and behind her was nothing but empty air and a deadly fall. "Please," she said, backing toward the edge. "I never did anything to you. Why are you doing this?" "Because you don't belong here," Marcus said, his voice filled with contempt. "This academy is for real soldiers, not for little girls playing dress-up. Your parents probably paid some politician to get you in here." Sarah's hands balled into fists at the insult to her family. Her mother had died when she was 12, and her father had worked double shifts at a factory to save money for her education. She had earned her place at Preston through merit, not connections. But she couldn't tell them that without revealing too much about her background. "My family worked for everything we have," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I earned my place here just like everyone else." "Earned it?" Jake scoffed. "You can't even do 10 proper push-ups. I've seen you struggling during PT. You're an embarrassment to the uniform." He nodded to his companions. "Grab her." Marcus and Tommy moved forward, but Sarah was ready. Years of training kicked in as she sidestepped Marcus's clumsy lunge and used his momentum to send him stumbling past her. Tommy hesitated, unsure of what he was seeing. The quiet, seemingly helpless girl they had been tormenting had moved with the fluid grace of a trained fighter. "What the hell?" Marcus gasped, struggling to regain his balance near the roof's edge. "How did she—" Jake's eyes narrowed as he studied Sarah with new interest. There was something different about her posture now, something that hadn't been there before. She stood with her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, her hands loose at her sides but ready to move. It was the stance of someone who knew how to fight. "Interesting," he said slowly. "Looks like our little mouse has some hidden talents. But it doesn't matter. There are 3 of us and 1 of you. The math is simple." Sarah knew he was right about the numbers, but wrong about the outcome. She had been trained by some of the most elite warriors in the world, men and women who had taught her that size and strength meant nothing without skill and discipline. These cadets were bullies, used to intimidating those weaker than themselves, but they had never faced someone who could fight back effectively. Last chance, Jake said, pulling out his phone. Either you jump, or we make this much worse for you. I've got video of you stealing from the commissary. One call to the commandant, and you're expelled in disgrace. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the depth of their planning. They hadn't brought her up here on impulse. This was a carefully orchestrated attack designed to destroy her life at the academy. The video was probably fake, but in the current climate of suspicion and hazing investigations, any accusation would be enough to ruin her. You're lying, she said, but she could hear the doubt in her own voice. Jake smiled coldly and showed her his phone screen. The video was grainy, but it clearly showed someone who looked like her taking money from the commissary register. It was a sophisticated fake, probably created using deep fake technology that was becoming increasingly common among tech-savvy students. Amazing what you can do with a little creativity, he said. The timestamp shows this happening last week when you were supposedly in the library. Good luck proving you were somewhere else when half the academy saw you struggling with basic combat training. The three cadets began to close in again, more confident now that they had shown their leverage. Sarah realized she was trapped between physical violence and academic destruction. Either way, her dreams of military service would be over before they had truly begun. What do you want? She asked, playing for time while she assessed her options. Simple, Jake replied. You jump. Make it look like an accident. Maybe you were up here studying the stars or something equally stupid. Either way, you're gone. And we never have to see your pathetic face again. And if I survive the fall? Marcus laughed. From this height, into concrete, the only question is whether they'll need a closed-casket funeral. Tommy looked sick at his friend's casual discussion of murder, but he said nothing. Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes, the part of him that knew this had gone too far warring with his fear of becoming the next target. You're talking about murder, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. All three of you will go to prison for the rest of your lives. Who's going to prove it? Jake asked. Three upstanding cadets with spotless records against a dead girl with a history of mental instability and academic struggles? The investigation will conclude you couldn't handle the pressure and took your own life. Case closed. Sarah realized they had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They had studied her schedule, created false evidence, and chosen this moment when they would have alibis and she would be isolated. It was the work of predators who had done this before, or at least thought carefully about how to do it successfully. You've done this before, she said, and saw Jake's confident smile flicker for just a moment. Don't be ridiculous, he said, but there was something in his voice that confirmed her suspicion. This is just about getting rid of one problem cadet who doesn't belong here. Sarah thought about the other female cadets who had left the academy under mysterious circumstances over the past year. Maria Santos, who had supposedly suffered a nervous breakdown during finals week. Jennifer Park, who had been expelled for academic fraud that she swore she hadn't committed. Lisa Chun, who had simply disappeared one night, leaving only a note saying she couldn't handle the pressure. How many others? She asked quietly. Jake's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath his boyish features. Enough to know exactly how this works, he said. Preston Academy has standards to maintain. We can't have weaklings dragging down the reputation of future military leaders. The military needs all kinds of people, Sarah said, backing slowly toward the edge as the three cadets continued their advance. Intelligence, courage, dedication. Not everyone has to be a linebacker. Save the speech for someone who cares, Marcus said. You've had 3 months to prove you belong here, and all you've done is embarrass yourself and waste everyone's time. Sarah felt the low wall at the roof's edge press against her back. Behind her was a 30-foot drop to concrete, almost certainly fatal. In front of her were 3 young men who had already committed themselves to murder. Her options were running out quickly. Any last words? Jake asked, his phone ready to record what would appear to be a suicide confession. Sarah looked at each of them in turn, memorizing their faces and their words. If she somehow survived this, she would make sure they faced justice for their crimes. But survival seemed increasingly unlikely as they closed the final distance between them. Just one thing, she said, her voice steady despite her circumstances. You should have done your homework better. What's that supposed to mean? Tommy asked, speaking for the first time in several minutes. Sarah smiled grimly as she prepared to fight for her life. It means you picked the wrong girl to mess with. The three cadets exchanged glances, unsure what to make of her sudden confidence. They had cornered her, threatened her, and shown her evidence that could destroy her future. By all rights, she should be begging for mercy or preparing to jump. Instead, she stood straight and looked them in the eye as if she held all the cards. Stop playing games, Jake snapped. You're finished. The tension on the rooftop reached a breaking point as Jake Thompson's patience finally snapped. Fine, he snarled, lunging forward with his hands outstretched. We'll do this the hard way. Sarah's training took over instantly. As Jake reached for her, she dropped low and swept his legs, sending the larger cadet crashing to the rooftop. In the same fluid motion, she rolled away from the edge and came up in a fighting stance that spoke of years of professional combat training. Marcus Reed stared in shock as his confident leader writhed on the ground, clutching his knee where it had struck the concrete. What the hell just happened? He stammered, looking between Sarah and the fallen Jake. Impossible, Jake gasped, struggling to his feet. She got lucky, that's all. But, even as he said it, he was studying Sarah with new eyes. The way she moved, the balance in her stance, the calm expression on her face. None of it matched the frightened girl they had cornered just moments before. Tommy Walsh backed away slowly, his survival instincts finally overriding his fear of his companions. Guys, maybe we should just leave. This isn't worth it. Shut up, Tommy. Jake snapped, though his voice carried less authority than before. He pulled himself upright, favoring his injured leg. She just caught me off guard. There are still 3 of us. Sarah remained silent, her dark eyes tracking the 3 cadets as they spread out in an attempt to surround her. She had hoped to avoid violence, but these young men had forced her hand. Years of classified missions and deadly encounters had taught her that sometimes the only way to stop predators was to show them what real danger looked like. Who are you? Jake asked, circling her slowly. That move you just pulled, that wasn't something you learned in basic self-defense classes. Sarah considered her options. Her cover story was carefully constructed and had fooled the Academy's admissions board, but she hadn't expected to need it in a life-or-death situation. The truth was classified at the highest levels, sealed away in military files that these cadets could never access. As far as the world knew, Sarah Martinez was a 19-year-old freshman cadet from a small town in Texas. The reality was far different. Sarah Elena Martinez was 28 years old, a former Navy SEAL with 6 years of active combat experience in operations across 3 continents. She had been recruited by a special Pentagon program designed to identify and eliminate security threats within military educational institutions. Her mission at Preston Academy was to investigate reports of systematic harassment and possible criminal activity among the cadet population. I'm nobody special, she said, maintaining her defensive posture as Marcus tried to flank her. Just someone who doesn't like bullies. Jake's laugh was sharp and bitter. Nobody special? You just dropped a 200-pound football player like he was made of paper. That doesn't happen by accident. He was right, and Sarah knew it. Her cover was blown, at least with these 3. The question now was whether she could complete her mission without revealing the full extent of her background. The Pentagon had spent months establishing her false identity, and blowing it over 3 cadet bullies would compromise years of careful planning. Maybe you're not as tough as you think, she said, hoping to provoke them into making mistakes. Maybe you just never met anyone who fought back before. Marcus took the bait, rushing forward with his fists raised. Sarah sidestepped his clumsy charge and delivered a precise strike to his solar plexus. The larger cadet dropped to his knees, gasping for air. In less than 10 seconds, she had neutralized 2 of her 3 attackers without breaking a sweat. Tommy Walsh stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror. Whatever he had expected when they cornered Sarah on the rooftop, it wasn't this. The girl they had planned to murder was systematically dismantling his companions with the efficiency of a trained killer. Please, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. I didn't want to hurt you. This was all their idea. Sarah studied his face, noting the genuine fear and remorse there. Tommy was different from the others, a follower rather than a leader, someone who had been swept up in something much darker than he understood. She had encountered his type before in her military career, good people who made bad choices because they were afraid to stand alone. Then, walk away, she said quietly. Go back to your room and pretend this never happened. Forget you ever knew Jake Thompson or Marcus Reed. Tommy looked at his fallen companions, then back at Sarah. She could see him weighing his options, calculating the cost of loyalty versus the price of survival. After a long moment, he nodded and backed toward the stairwell. Tommy, Jake called out, struggling to stand despite his injured knee. Don't you dare leave us up here with her. We're supposed to be a team. Tommy paused at the top of the stairs, his hand on the door handle. Some things are more important than teamwork, he said, like not becoming a murderer. The heavy door clanged shut behind him, leaving Sarah alone with Jake and Marcus. Jake's face twisted with rage as he realized his carefully planned attack was falling apart. Coward, he spat, though whether he was referring to Tommy or expressing his own fears was unclear. Fine, Marcus, and I can handle one little girl. Marcus was still on his knees, struggling to breathe properly after Sarah's strike. His face was pale and sweaty, and he looked nothing like the confident bully who had helped corner her earlier. Jake, he wheezed, something's wrong. She moves like a professional. Professionals don't end up in military academies, Jake replied, but his voice lacked conviction. He was studying Sarah with the focused attention of someone who finally recognized he was in real danger. She's probably just some gang member's daughter who learned to fight on the streets. Sarah almost smiled at his naive assessment. Street fighting and military combat training were completely different disciplines, as different as playing catch and pitching in the major leagues. Jake Thompson, for all his bluster and family connections, had no idea what real violence looked like. You still have a choice, she told them both. Walk away now, and we can forget this ever happened. Keep pushing, and I promise you'll regret it. Jake pulled out his phone again, waving the fake video at her. You're forgetting something, mystery girl. I've still got evidence of your crimes. Even if you beat us up, you're finished at this academy. Sarah's expression didn't change, but internally, she was calculating. The video was sophisticated enough to fool casual observers, but her Pentagon handlers would have resources to prove it was fabricated. The real question was whether she could maintain her cover long enough to complete her mission. That video won't stand up to serious investigation, she said. Digital forensics can prove it's fake within hours. Jake's confidence wavered slightly. Maybe, but who's going to order a digital forensics investigation for some nobody cadet? You think the commandant cares enough about you to waste resources on proving your innocence? He had a point. Sarah's cover identity was deliberately unremarkable, designed to avoid attention from Academy officials. If Jake released the video through proper channels, it would probably be accepted at face value. Her handlers would eventually clear her name, but by then, her mission would be compromised. Besides, Marcus added, finally, able to speak normally, who's going to believe we attacked you? Look at us. He gestured to his bruised abdomen and Jake's injured leg. You're the one who assaulted Academy cadets. We were just trying to defend ourselves. Sarah realized they were right. In any official investigation, she would be the one facing charges. 3 male cadets with spotless records and family connections against 1 female cadet with suspicious fighting skills and a convenient victim story. The Academy would want to avoid scandal and would likely side with the more politically connected students. You're thinking too small, she said, deciding to shift tactics. You want to know who I really am? Fine. But once you hear the truth, there's no going back. Jake and Marcus exchanged glances, curiosity warring with caution in their expressions. They had expected to commit a simple murder and cover it up as suicide, but Sarah's unexpected competence had turned their plan into something much more complicated. Go ahead, Jake said finally. Tell us your big secret. Let's see if it's as impressive as your fighting moves. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. Her handlers would be furious about the breach of operational security, but she was running out of options. Sometimes the best way to maintain a cover was to abandon it entirely. My name is Sarah Elena Martinez, she said, her voice carrying a new authority that made both cadets step back involuntarily. Former Petty Officer First Class, United States Navy SEALs. 6 years active combat service, 3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star for Valor in Afghanistan. I'm not a 19-year-old cadet. I'm 28 years old, and I'm here on orders from the Pentagon. The silence that followed her revelation was broken only by the wind whipping across the rooftop. Jake and Marcus stared at her with expressions of complete disbelief, trying to reconcile the small woman before them with the combat credentials she had just claimed. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "Women can't be SEALs." "The policy changed," Sarah replied, quietly and with very little publicity. "There are currently 14 active female SEALs, though that information is classified. I was part of the second training class to include women." Jake's phone had fallen forgotten in his hand as he processed what she was telling them. "If you're really military, why are you here? Why pretend to be a cadet?" "Because Preston Academy has a problem," Sarah said, her voice growing harder. "Female cadets have been disappearing or being forced out under suspicious circumstances. The Pentagon got tired of waiting for the Academy to investigate itself, so they sent someone who could find out what's really happening." The two cadets looked at each other, and Sarah could see the moment when they realized the full implications of what they had just attempted. They hadn't tried to murder a helpless student. They had tried to assassinate a federal agent conducting an official investigation. "You're lying," Jake said, but his voice lacked any conviction. "This is just some elaborate story to scare us." Sarah reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a standard smartphone. She pressed a series of buttons, and suddenly, the device emitted a high-pitched beep that neither cadet recognized. Within seconds, her voice recording of their entire conversation played back through the speaker, crystal clear despite the wind and distance. "Every word you've said tonight has been recorded and transmitted to a secure server," she told them. "Your threats, your admissions of guilt, your discussion of previous victims, all of it. Even if you killed me right now, the evidence would still exist." Jake's face had gone completely white as he listened to his own voice discussing murder and describing their fake evidence. "Turn it off," he said desperately. "Delete the recording." "Can't do that," Sarah replied. "It's not stored locally, and I don't have administrative access to the server. Once something goes into the system, it stays there permanently." Marcus sat heavily on the rooftop, his head in his hands. "We're dead," he moaned. "My father's going to kill me. My whole family's military. This will destroy everyone." "Not necessarily," Sarah said, and both cadets looked up at her with desperate hope. "You tried to commit murder tonight, but you haven't actually killed anyone yet. That's the difference between attempted murder and actual murder. One carries a life sentence, the other might get you 10 to 15 with good behavior." "What do you want?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would determine the rest of his life. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the confrontation began, it was a genuinely warm expression. "I want the truth about what's been happening at this academy. I want names, dates, methods, and evidence. I want to know every female cadet you've targeted and exactly what you did to them." She gestured around the rooftop where they stood. "But most of all, I want to know who's been helping you. 3 cadets don't operate a conspiracy like this without adult supervision. Someone with real authority has been protecting you and covering up your crimes." Jake's shoulders sagged as he realized there was no escape from the trap they had walked into. "If we cooperate, what happens to us?" "That depends on how cooperative you are," Sarah replied. "Full confession, complete testimony, and active assistance in cleaning up this academy might get you reduced sentences. Maybe even a chance to serve your time in military prison instead of federal lockup." She stepped closer to both cadets, and they could see the steel in her dark eyes. "But if you try to run, or lie, or cover up anything else, I promise you'll face the full weight of federal justice. And, trust me, you don't want to find out what that looks like." Marcus looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "How do we know you won't just arrest us anyway?" "We tried to kill you." "Because I'm not a police officer," Sarah said. "I'm an investigator. My job is to find the truth and fix the problem, not to punish every individual criminal. You're small fish, and I'm hunting sharks." Jake straightened slightly, some of his natural arrogance returning. "What if we refuse? What if we take our chances with lawyers and family connections?" The confession that followed on the rooftop that night would ultimately expose the darkest scandal in Preston Military Academy's 150-year history. As Jake Thompson and Marcus Reed sat on the cold concrete and told their story, Sarah Martinez realized that what she had uncovered was far more sinister than simple bullying or hazing gone wrong. It started 3 years ago. Jake began, his voice hollow with defeat. A new instructor arrived, Colonel Victoria Blackwood. She seemed perfect, decorated combat veteran, impeccable service record, strong recommendations from the Pentagon. The Academy was thrilled to have her. Sarah made mental notes as she listened, already planning how to verify each detail through her Pentagon contacts. Colonel Blackwood's name wasn't familiar, but that didn't mean much in the world of special operations and classified assignments. At first, everything seemed normal. Marcus continued, picking up the narrative. Blackwood taught advanced military tactics and strategic planning. She was tough, but fair, and she seemed genuinely committed to training the next generation of officers. Jake nodded grimly. But then, she started paying special attention to certain cadets. Male cadets from military families, guys who were already showing leadership potential. She called us her elite circle and said we were being prepared for special responsibilities. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind. She had seen this pattern before in her investigative work. Charismatic authority figures who identified and groomed potential accomplices from among their students or subordinates. It was a classic recruitment technique used by both criminal organizations and enemy intelligence services. What kind of special responsibilities? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. She said that modern warfare required a different type of officer. Someone who wasn't constrained by outdated ideas about fairness and equality. She called it evolutionary leadership, the idea that only the strongest should survive to lead others. Social Darwinism, Sarah said quietly. Survival of the fittest applied to military leadership. Jake looked surprised that she recognized the philosophical framework. Exactly. Blackwood said that the military had been weakened by political correctness and diversity initiatives. She believed that allowing women and minorities into combat roles was undermining American military superiority. Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the anger burning in her chest. She had fought alongside male and female soldiers of every ethnicity and background, had seen courage and cowardice in equal measure across all demographic lines. The idea that military effectiveness was determined by gender or race was not only wrong, but dangerously naive. So she recruited you to act on these beliefs, she said. Not directly, Marcus replied quickly. She was too smart for that. She never explicitly ordered us to do anything illegal. Instead, she created a philosophical framework and let us draw our own conclusions about what needed to be done. It was a sophisticated approach, Sarah realized. By avoiding direct orders, Blackwood had protected herself from criminal liability while still achieving her goals. Her students thought they were acting on their own initiative, but they were actually following a carefully designed psychological manipulation. Tell me about the other victims, Sarah said. How many female cadets have you targeted? Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. 17 over the past 2 years, he said quietly. But we weren't the only ones. Blackwood had similar groups in every class year. Altogether, there were probably 50 or 60 female cadets who were forced out. The numbers were staggering. Preston Academy graduated about 200 cadets per year, with roughly 30% female enrollment. If Jake's estimates were accurate, the conspiracy had eliminated nearly half of all female cadets over a 2-year period. What happened to them? Sarah asked. Marcus answered first. The lucky ones were expelled on fake charges, academic dishonesty, drug use, psychological instability. We would plant evidence or create situations that made them look incompetent or unstable. And the unlucky ones. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 committed suicide. 2 more had accidents during training exercises. One girl, Jennifer Park, just disappeared completely. Her family filed missing person reports, but the academy said she had run away. Sarah felt her professional detachment slipping as she listened to the casual recitation of destroyed lives. These weren't just statistics or case files. They were young women who had dreamed of serving their country, only to be systematically destroyed by the institution that should have protected them. Jennifer Park? She said, remembering the name from her mission briefing. What really happened to her? The two cadets exchanged a look that told Sarah everything she needed to know. She found out about the conspiracy, Marcus said finally. She had been documenting harassment incidents and building a case to present to the Academy administration. Blackwood found out about her investigation. Where is she now? Jake shook his head. We don't know for sure. One day she was there, the next day she was gone. Blackwood said she had been dealt with, but she never told us what that meant. Sarah made a mental note to prioritize finding Jennifer Park in her investigation. If the girl was still alive, she was either in hiding or being held somewhere against her will. If she was dead, then this case had moved from institutional corruption to murder. Tell me about Colonel Blackwood, Sarah said. What's her background? How did she get assigned to Preston? Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed her an official Academy biography. According to her file, she's a career infantry officer who served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. She has a Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a recommendation from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Sarah studied the photo and biographical information, comparing it to her mental database of military personnel. Something about Blackwood's face seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she might have seen it before. Has she ever mentioned her previous assignments in detail? Sarah asked. Jake nodded. She loves talking about her combat experience. According to her, she commanded an elite reconnaissance unit that operated behind enemy lines. She said they had a 100% mission success rate and 0 casualties under her leadership. Red flags were going off in Sarah's mind. Elite reconnaissance units didn't advertise their existence or their success rates. If Blackwood was really discussing classified operations with cadets, she was either lying about her background or violating serious security protocols. Did she ever mention specific unit designations or operation names? Sarah asked. She called her unit Ghost Company, Marcus replied. She said they were so effective that the enemy never even knew they had been there. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew Ghost Company, though not from any official military records. Ghost Company was a code name used by a rogue CIA paramilitary unit that had operated in Afghanistan from 2019 to 2021. The unit had been disbanded after allegations of war crimes and unauthorized civilian casualties. Its commanding officer had been court-martialed and disappeared into the federal prison system. But, according to Marcus, that commanding officer was now teaching at Preston Military Academy under a false identity. Marcus, Sarah said carefully. Are you absolutely certain that's what she called her unit? Positive. She had us research historical precedents for unconventional warfare tactics. She said Ghost Company had written the book on how to eliminate threats without leaving evidence behind. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. If Colonel Victoria Blackwood was really the former commander of Ghost Company, then her presence at Preston Academy wasn't coincidence or career advancement. She was continuing her war crimes under the cover of educational authority. I need to see her office, Sarah said. Tonight, while she's off campus. Jake shook his head frantically. That's impossible. The faculty building is locked after hours, and there are security cameras everywhere. Even if we could get you inside, Blackwood has electronic locks on her office door. Electronic locks can be defeated, Sarah replied. And security cameras only matter if someone reviews the footage. How often does Academy security actually check their recordings? Marcus thought for a moment. Hardly ever, unless there's been a specific incident. The security staff is mostly made up of retired campus police who are just collecting paychecks until they qualify for full pensions. Sarah smiled grimly. Lax security was both a blessing and a curse in institutional investigations. It made her job easier, but it also explained how someone like Blackwood could operate undetected for years. Here's what's going to happen, she told the two cadets. You're going to help me get into that office, and then you're going to provide detailed statements about everything you've told me tonight. After that, you're going to continue acting normally while I complete my investigation. What if Blackwood suspects something? Jake asked nervously. She's paranoid about security, and she has contacts throughout the Academy administration. If she finds out we've talked to you, then you'd better make sure she doesn't find out, Sarah replied bluntly. Because if this investigation fails, You'll be facing federal prosecutors who won't be interested in plea bargains. Your only protection now is helping me build an airtight case against the real criminals." Marcus nodded reluctantly. "What do you need us to do?" "First, I need detailed information about Blackwood's schedule and habits. When does she leave campus? Where does she go? Who does she meet with? I also need a complete list of every cadet who's been part of her elite circle, along with whatever evidence you have of the harassment campaigns." Jake pulled out his phone again. "I can get you most of that information tonight. Blackwood keeps detailed files on all of us, including our assignments and performance evaluations. She treats the whole thing like a real military operation." "Because to her, it is a real military operation," Sarah said. "She's conducting psychological warfare against American military personnel, using cadets as her weapons. In her mind, she's still fighting the same war she fought in Afghanistan." The implications of this revelation hung heavily in the night air. If Sarah was right about Blackwood's true identity, then Preston Academy had become the headquarters for a domestic terrorism operation designed to undermine the U.S. military from within. "There's something else," Marcus said hesitantly. "Something we haven't told you yet." Sarah waited, knowing from experience that the most important information often came at the end of confessions, when subjects finally worked up the courage to reveal their deepest secrets. "Blackwood has been recruiting outside the academy too," Jake said. "She has contacts at other military schools, and she's been building a network of like-minded officers and cadets. She calls it the New Spartan Movement." The name sent chills down Sarah's spine. Ancient Sparta had been a militaristic society that emphasized strength and conquest above all other values. It had also been infamous for its practice of exposing weak infants to die of natural causes, believing that only the strong deserved to survive. "How big is this network?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. "We only know about the parts that directly affect us. But Blackwood has mentioned contacts at West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and at least 6 private military schools. She talks about them like they're all working toward the same goals." Sarah realized she was looking at something much larger than institutional corruption at a single academy. If Marcus was telling the truth, then Victoria Blackwood was operating a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of American military education. The implications for national security were staggering. "I need to contact my handlers," she said, more to herself than to the cadets. "Your handlers?" Jake asked. "I thought you said you were working for the Pentagon." "I am," Sarah replied. "But this investigation just became a matter of national security. The people I report to are going to want to know about the New Spartan Movement immediately." She pulled out her secure phone and began composing a coded message to her Pentagon contact. The investigation of Preston Academy had just become a counterintelligence operation with implications far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The faculty building of Preston Military Academy stood like a fortress against the pre-dawn darkness, its Georgian columns and brick facade projecting an image of stability and tradition that Sarah Martinez now knew was completely false. At 3:47 a.m., the building was deserted except for a single security guard who was currently making his rounds on the opposite side of campus. Sarah crouched behind a maintenance. The young cadet had revealed yet another layer of the conspiracy when he explained how Blackwood had taught her elite circle basic breaking and entering techniques as part of what she called unconventional warfare training. "Almost got it," Jake whispered, his fingers dancing over a small electronic device connected to the door's keypad. "Blackwood made us practice on this system for weeks. She said real military leaders needed to be able to access information regardless of official authorization." Marcus Reed stood watch near the corner of the building, his nervous energy barely contained as he scanned for any sign of approaching security. The events of the past few hours had transformed him from a confident bully into a frightened accomplice, and Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across his face. "This is insane," Marcus muttered. "If we get caught breaking into faculty offices, we'll be expelled instantly. My father will never forgive me." "Your father's going to have bigger problems to worry about when the FBI starts investigating military academy corruption," Sarah replied quietly. "Right now, cooperation is your only chance at avoiding federal prison." The lock clicked open with a soft electronic beep, and Jake stepped back with a mixture of pride and fear. "We're in," he said. "But Blackwood's office is on the third floor, and there are motion sensors in all the hallways." Sarah had already planned for this contingency. During her reconnaissance of the academy, she had identified multiple security vulnerabilities that suggested the system was designed more for show than for actual protection. Like many institutional security measures, it was intended to deter casual intruders rather than determined professionals. "The motion sensors have dead zones near the ceiling and floor," she explained as they slipped inside the building. "Military facilities use similar systems, and they all have the same weaknesses. Stay low and move slowly, and the sensors won't detect us." They made their way through the darkened corridors like ghosts, Sarah leading with the fluid movement of someone trained in infiltration techniques. The building's layout was typical of academic institutions: long hallways with offices on both sides, conference rooms, and administrative spaces designed for maximum efficiency rather than security. Colonel Blackwood's office was located in the most prestigious section of the third floor, with a corner location that provided windows overlooking both the parade ground and the academy's main entrance. The nameplate on her door identified her as Professor of Military Strategy and Advanced Tactics, but Sarah now knew that her real curriculum was far different from what appeared in the official course catalog. Jake produced another electronic device, this one more sophisticated than the simple lockpick he had used downstairs. "Blackwood's personal security is military grade," he explained as he connected leads to the office door's locking mechanism. She had this installed after she arrived, claiming her research materials were classified. Sarah watched him work, noting the professional quality of both the security system and Jake's technique in defeating it. Victoria Blackwood had clearly invested significant time and resources in training her student accomplices, treating them as actual operatives rather than simple recruits. "How many other skills has she taught you?" Sarah asked as Jake's device beeped softly and the office door clicked open. "Electronic surveillance, basic cryptography, document forgery, social engineering," Marcus replied, ticking off the subjects on his fingers. "She called it intelligence tradecraft. We thought we were getting advanced military training." "You were," Sarah said grimly. "Just not the kind that serves America's interests." The interior of Blackwood's office was a study in controlled paranoia. Multiple computer monitors filled one wall, each displaying different security camera feeds from around the academy. File cabinets lined another wall, secured with both electronic and physical locks that spoke of someone who trusted no one with her secrets. But it was the third wall that truly revealed Victoria Blackwood's psychology. Dozens of photographs covered the surface, military units in combat zones, weapons training exercises, and what appeared to be classified operational briefings. At the center of this display was a large photograph of a military ceremony with a woman in dress uniform receiving a commendation from a general Sarah didn't recognize. "Is that her?" Sarah asked, pointing to the woman in the photograph. Jake nodded. "That's Colonel Blackwood. The picture was taken after her unit's final mission in Afghanistan, just before Ghost Company was disbanded." Sarah studied the photograph carefully, comparing it to her mental database of military personnel. The woman in the picture was younger and more optimistic-looking than the paranoid conspiracy theorist who now ran indoctrination sessions for impressionable cadets. But the bone structure and facial features were unmistakably the same. "Jake," she said slowly, "how long ago did Blackwood show you this picture?" "About 6 months ago, during one of our first advanced training sessions." "What?" Sarah pulled out her secure phone and activated its camera function, taking high-resolution photographs of the ceremony picture and several others that showed identifiable military personnel. Something about the timing of Blackwood's revelation didn't make sense, and she suspected there was more to the story than simple nostalgia. Because Ghost Company was disbanded in 2021, and its commanding officer was court-martialed for war crimes in 2022, Sarah explained as she photographed the office's contents. "If that's really Victoria Blackwood in the picture, then she should be serving a life sentence in military prison right now." Marcus stared at the photograph with new understanding. "You're saying she escaped from prison?" "I'm saying someone with that name and background should not be walking free, much less teaching at a military academy," Sarah replied. "Either your colonel is using a false identity, or someone very powerful pulled strings to get her released from custody. Jake was examining the file cabinets, his face pale as he processed the implications. If she's supposed to be in prison, then how did she get hired here? The Academy does background checks on all faculty members. Background checks only work if the information in them is accurate, Sarah said. She photographed a diploma on the wall claiming Victoria Blackwood had earned a PhD in military psychology from Georgetown University. I'll bet if we check with Georgetown, they'll have no record of anyone by that name in their graduate programs. She moved to Blackwood's desk and began systematically photographing documents and files. Most of the material appeared to be related to normal academic work, lesson plans, grade sheets, correspondence with other faculty members. But hidden beneath the mundane paperwork were folders that told a very different story. "Look at this," Sarah called softly, holding up a folder labeled Operational Assessment, Phase 1 Complete. Inside were detailed psychological profiles of every female cadet who had been forced out of the academy over the past 2 years, including photographs, family background information, and notes on their elimination methods. Marcus read over her shoulder, his voice shaking as he recognized names and faces. "These are all the girls we targeted. But look at the detail level. She knows things about their families that we never told her." Sarah flipped through the profiles, noting the professional quality of the intelligence gathering. Each file contained information that would require significant resources to obtain: financial records, medical histories, psychological evaluations, even surveillance photographs taken off campus. She's not just running a harassment campaign, Sarah realized. She's conducting full-spectrum intelligence operations against American citizens. This is domestic espionage on a massive scale. A second folder contained equally disturbing material: recruitment profiles for potential New Spartan Movement members at other military institutions. Sarah photographed page after page of detailed assessments, contact information, and operational plans for expanding the conspiracy beyond Preston Academy. "My God," Jake whispered as he looked at the recruitment files. "She's building an army." Sarah found a third folder that made her blood run cold. It was labeled Phase 2 Implementation and contained plans for something called Operation Cleansing Fire. The documents outlined a systematic campaign to eliminate female personnel from all branches of the U.S. military, using a combination of harassment, false accusations, and what the files euphemistically called permanent solutions. "We need to get this information to the Pentagon immediately," Sarah said, photographing every page as quickly as possible. "This isn't just about academy corruption anymore. Blackwood is planning attacks on active military personnel." As she worked, Marcus discovered something that explained how such an extensive operation could remain hidden from academy administration. A locked drawer in Blackwood's desk contained copies of personnel files for key academy officials, along with detailed documentation of their personal weaknesses and vulnerabilities. "Blackmail material," Marcus said, showing Sarah photographs of the academy commandant in compromising situations. "She's got dirt on everyone in authority here." "Which explains how she's been operating with impunity for 3 years, Sarah replied. "Anyone who tried to investigate her would find themselves facing exposure of their own secrets." Jake had been examining Blackwood's computer system, and his technical skills proved more extensive than Sarah had expected. "I can access her encrypted files," he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "She taught us her password protocols as part of operational security training." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Download everything you can find, but be careful not to leave any traces of access." As Jake worked, Sarah continued photographing documents and making mental notes about the office's security measures. The level of sophistication she was seeing suggested that Victoria Blackwood had significant support from outside sources, the kind of resources that required either government backing or substantial private funding. "Sarah," Marcus said urgently from his position near the window. "There's a car pulling into the parking lot. It looks like Academy security." Sarah checked her watch. It was 4:23 a.m., too early for normal security rounds, but exactly the right time for someone to check on unusual activities. "How long do we need, Jake?" 2 more minutes to finish the download," Jake replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. "But if security comes up here." "They won't," Sarah said with quiet confidence. Marcus, what's the security guard's normal patrol pattern for this building? Marcus thought quickly. He usually enters through the main door, checks the first-floor common areas, then takes the elevator to the third floor and works his way down. Perfect. That gives us at least 5 minutes before he reaches this office. Sarah finished photographing the last of the physical documents and moved to help Jake with the computer files. Jake, priority download on anything related to Phase 2 or Operation Cleansing Fire. Everything else is secondary. The sound of footsteps echoing in the stairwell below confirmed that the security guard was beginning his patrol. Sarah mentally calculated angles and timing, her SEAL training automatically assessing escape routes and contingency plans. Got it, Jake said, pulling his data drive from the computer and shutting down the system. Everything's copied, and I've covered our access tracks. Sarah did a final visual sweep of the office, ensuring that nothing had been disturbed or left behind that might indicate their presence. The documents were back in their original positions, the computer appeared untouched, and the various security devices showed no signs of tampering. We need to move, she said quietly. Single file, stay low, and remember the motion sensor dead zones. They slipped out of Blackwood's office and began making their way toward the emergency exit stairs at the far end of the corridor. Behind them, Sarah could hear the elevator arriving at the third floor and the security guard beginning his routine inspection of the faculty offices. As they descended the emergency stairs, Sarah's mind was already processing the intelligence they had gathered. Victoria Blackwood wasn't just a rogue instructor or a disturbed individual acting alone. She was the operational commander of a well-funded, professionally organized conspiracy that posed a direct threat to American military readiness. The dawn light streaming through Sarah Martinez's dormitory window did nothing to ease the tension that had been building since her discovery in Colonel Blackwood's office. Her secure phone had been buzzing constantly with encrypted messages from Pentagon intelligence officials who were coordinating what was rapidly becoming the largest counterintelligence operation in recent military history. As Sarah reviewed the downloaded files from Blackwood's computer, the scope of the new Spartan movement became terrifyingly clear. The conspiracy extended far beyond Preston Academy, reaching into every branch of the U.S. military and involving dozens of high-ranking officers who shared Blackwood's extremist ideology. Operation Cleansing Fire was scheduled to begin in just 72 hours, timed to coincide with a major military exercise that would place thousands of female service members in vulnerable positions across multiple bases. The plan was sophisticated and brutal in its simplicity, systematic accidents, and training mishaps that would eliminate women from combat roles while appearing to be nothing more than tragic coincidences. Sarah's room door opened quietly, and Jake Thompson slipped inside with the nervous energy of someone who hadn't slept in 24 hours. His face was pale and drawn, aged by the weight of everything he had learned about his role in the conspiracy. "I've been thinking about Jennifer Park," he said without preamble. "The girl who disappeared. I think I know where she is." Sarah looked up from her laptop, noting the determination in Jake's voice. The events of the past day had fundamentally changed the young cadet, stripping away his arrogance and revealing someone who was genuinely horrified by what he had been part of. "Tell me," she said simply. Jake pulled out his tablet and showed her a map of the area surrounding Preston Academy. "Blackwood owns a private property about 15 miles from here. She bought it under a shell company, but I recognized the address from some papers I saw in her office. She calls it her research facility, but none of us have ever been allowed to visit." Sarah studied the satellite imagery Jake had pulled up, noting the isolated location and the presence of what appeared to be converted warehouse buildings. The property was surrounded by dense forest and accessible only by a single gravel road, perfect for conducting activities that required absolute privacy. "How did you find out about this place?" Sarah asked. Marcus remembered seeing the address on some delivery receipts in Blackwood's office, Jake explained. "Medical supplies, electronic equipment, construction materials, the kind of stuff you'd need to set up a secure facility. We did some research online and found the property records." Sarah's phone buzzed with another encrypted message, this one from a Pentagon contact she recognized. The message was brief but alarming. "FBI raid teams en route to Preston. Blackwood discovered missing. Assume operational security compromised. Proceed with extreme caution. Change of plans, Sarah said, standing up and moving toward her gear bag. Federal agents are already on their way here, which means someone tipped off Blackwood that we were investigating her. If Jennifer Park is at that property, this might be our only chance to reach her before Blackwood eliminates the evidence. Jake's face went white as he processed the implications. You mean she might kill Jennifer to cover her tracks? I mean she might already have killed Jennifer and be preparing to dispose of the body, Sarah replied bluntly. People like Victoria Blackwood don't leave loose ends when their operations are threatened. Sarah's training and experience told her that attempting a rescue mission without backup was extremely dangerous, but waiting for official authorization might cost Jennifer Park her life. The decision came down to a simple calculation. Was she willing to risk her own life to save someone who might already be dead? The answer was yes, without hesitation. I'm going with you, Jake said as Sarah checked her concealed weapon and tactical equipment. This is my fault. If I hadn't been part of this conspiracy, Jennifer would still be safe. Sarah studied the young man's face, looking for signs of the arrogance and cruelty that had characterized him just 24 hours earlier. What she saw instead was genuine remorse and a desperate need to atone for his actions. This isn't a training exercise, she warned him. If Blackwood is at that facility, she'll be armed and dangerous. She's a trained killer who's already committed multiple murders. Are you prepared for what that means? Jake nodded, though she could see the fear in his eyes. I understand the risks. But I can't live with myself if something happens to Jennifer because I was too cowardly to help. Sarah made a decision that violated several protocols, but felt morally necessary. Get Marcus and meet me at the campus motor pool in 10 minutes. We're going to need all the help we can get. As Jake hurried to collect his friend, Sarah sent a brief, encrypted message to her Pentagon handlers explaining her intentions. She knew they would order her to wait for backup, which was exactly why she wasn't asking for permission. The drive to Blackwood's property took them through increasingly remote countryside, past farms, and wooded areas that provided perfect cover for illegal activities. Sarah drove while Jake and Marcus navigated using the GPS coordinates they had discovered in Blackwood's files. There's something I haven't told you, Marcus said as they turned onto the gravel road leading to the property. Tommy Walsh called me this morning. He said Blackwood had been asking questions about our whereabouts last night. She knows something's wrong. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. If Blackwood suspected that her operation had been compromised, she might already be implementing contingency plans that included eliminating witnesses. Jennifer Park's life was hanging by an increasingly thin thread. The warehouse complex came into view as they crested a small hill, and Sarah immediately understood why Blackwood had chosen this location. The buildings were positioned to provide multiple escape routes while maintaining excellent defensive positions. Anyone approaching the facility would be visible from the main building long before they could reach effective engagement range. Stop here, Sarah ordered, pulling the vehicle behind a stand of trees about 200 yards from the main building. We go the rest of the way on foot. As they prepared to advance, Sarah noticed fresh tire tracks in the gravel and what appeared to be smoke coming from a chimney at the rear of the complex. Someone was definitely present, and they were actively using the facility for some purpose. Remember, she told Jake and Marcus as they checked their equipment, our primary objective is to locate and rescue Jennifer Park. Everything else is secondary. If we encounter armed resistance, follow my lead and don't try to be heroes. The approach to the warehouse complex required careful movement through open ground where they would be exposed to observation from multiple windows. Sarah led the way, using every piece of available cover while constantly scanning for threats. They had covered about half the distance when the unmistakable sound of a gunshot echoed from inside the main building. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as she realized they might already be too late. Move fast, she ordered, abandoning stealth for speed as they sprinted toward the building. That might have been Jennifer. The front entrance to the warehouse was secured with multiple locks, but Sarah's SEAL training included extensive experience with forced entry techniques. Within seconds, she had the door open and was leading Jake and Marcus into the building's interior. What they found inside confirmed Sarah's worst fears about Victoria Blackwood's true nature. The warehouse had been converted into a sophisticated interrogation and detention facility, complete with holding cells, surveillance equipment, and what appeared to be medical experimentation areas. "My God," Marcus whispered as they moved through the facility. "This is like something from a horror movie." Sarah was examining a wall covered with photographs and documents when she heard a weak voice calling for help from somewhere deeper in the building. "Here," the voice said. "I'm in here. Please help me." They followed the voice to a locked door at the rear of the warehouse. Sarah shot off the lock with her sidearm and found Jennifer Park chained to a wall in a small cell. The missing cadet was alive, but clearly had been subjected to prolonged physical and psychological torture. "Jennifer," Sarah said gently as she worked to free the girl from her restraints. "My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm here to get you out." Jennifer looked up with eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. "She said no one would ever find me. She said I would disappear just like the others." "What others?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The girls who asked too many questions," Jennifer replied. "Maria Santos, Lisa Chun, Ashley Rodriguez. They're all dead. Blackwood showed me their bodies to prove that resistance was useless." Sarah felt a cold fury building in her chest as she processed what Jennifer was telling her. Victoria Blackwood hadn't just been eliminating female cadets from the academy. She had been murdering them and disposing of their bodies at this facility. "Where is she now?" Sarah asked as she helped Jennifer to her feet. "She left about an hour ago," Jennifer said. "But she said she was coming back to finish the cleanup before the authorities arrived. She knows they're looking for her." Jake and Marcus were searching the rest of the facility when they heard vehicles approaching outside. Through the windows, Sarah could see two black SUVs racing up the gravel road toward the warehouse complex. "That's either the FBI or Blackwood coming back," Sarah said, positioning herself near a window to assess the threat. "Either way, we need to be ready." The vehicles stopped about 50 yards from the building, and Sarah could see armed figures deploying from both SUVs. Through her binoculars, she identified FBI tactical gear on some of the figures, but others were wearing civilian clothes and carrying weapons that didn't match standard law enforcement equipment. "Mixed force," she told the others. "Some FBI, some unknowns. This could be the rescue we've been waiting for, or it could be Blackwood arriving with reinforcements." The answer became clear when the lead figure removed her tactical helmet and revealed the face Sarah recognized from the photographs in Blackwood's office. Victoria Blackwood had returned to eliminate the evidence of her crimes, and she had brought help. "Jennifer," Sarah said urgently, "is there another way out of this building?" The injured cadet nodded weakly. "There's a tunnel system that connects to the other warehouses. Blackwood used it to move between buildings without being seen from the outside." Sarah made a rapid tactical assessment. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a building with limited exit options. But they had two advantages: knowledge of the facility's layout through Jennifer, and the element of surprise since Blackwood didn't know they were inside. "Jake, Marcus," she said, "I need you to get Jennifer to safety through those tunnels. Find a way to contact the FBI agents, and let them know there are friendlies in the building." "What about you?" Jake asked. Sarah checked her weapon and the spare ammunition she carried. "I'm going to make sure Victoria Blackwood doesn't walk away from this. She's murdered American citizens and betrayed everything our military stands for. That ends today." As Jake and Marcus helped Jennifer toward the tunnel entrance, Sarah took up a defensive position overlooking the main approach to the warehouse. Through her scope, she could see Blackwood directing her team with the professional competence of someone who had commanded combat operations. But Victoria Blackwood had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated Sarah Martinez, assuming that her carefully constructed cover identity reflected her actual capabilities. The former Ghost Company commander was about to discover what happened when a real Navy SEAL decided to end a terrorist operation permanently. The final confrontation between two highly trained military professionals was about to begin, with the future of American military integrity hanging in the balance. Sarah Martinez had been pushed off a metaphorical roof by 3 cadet bullies, only for them to discover she was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Now Victoria Blackwood was about to learn the same lesson, but, for her, there would be no opportunity to surrender or cooperate. Some crimes were too serious for plea bargains, and Some criminals were too dangerous to allow a second chance. The war for the soul of America's military was about to reach its climax in a converted warehouse in the Virginia countryside, where two women who had sworn the same oath would finally settle the question of what that oath really meant. The question now was who was backing her operation, and how many other Victoria Blackwoods were operating at military institutions across the country. Sarah's investigation of academy bullying had uncovered what might be the largest domestic terrorism case in U.S. history. They reached the ground floor without incident and slipped out through the same door they had used to enter. The pre-dawn air felt cold after the tension-filled atmosphere of Blackwood's office, and Sarah could see both cadets beginning to understand the true magnitude of what they had discovered. "What happens now?" Jake asked as they made their way back across campus. Sarah checked her secure phone and saw that she had 17 missed messages from her Pentagon handlers. News of the developing situation was already moving up the intelligence chain of command, and she knew that by morning, Preston Military Academy would be swarming with federal agents. "Now we finish this," she said, "and pray that we're in time to stop Operation Cleansing Fire before it begins." "What happens to us now?" Marcus asked quietly. Sarah looked at the two young men who had tried to murder her just hours earlier. They were still criminals who would face justice for their actions, but they were also victims of a sophisticated manipulation campaign designed to turn them into weapons against their own country. "Now you help me stop the people who turned you into killers," she said. "And maybe, if we're lucky, we can save some of the other cadets before they cross the same line you did." The wind picked up across the rooftop, carrying with it the promise of the storm that was about to engulf Preston Military Academy and everyone connected to the new Spartan movement. Sarah Martinez, former Navy SEAL turned federal investigator, had stumbled onto the biggest domestic terrorism case of her career, and it had all started with 3 bullies who thought they could push the wrong girl off a roof. Sarah's smile turned cold again. "Then, you'll find out why the Navy sends SEALs to handle problems that can't be solved through normal channels. Your family connections won't help you when you're facing federal charges with recorded confessions. And Jake, your father the general won't be able to protect you when the Pentagon decides you're a security risk." The implications of her threat hung in the air between them. Both cadets understood that they had stumbled into something much larger than academy hazing. They were facing a federal investigation with national security implications, and their only chance of survival was complete cooperation. "Okay," Jake said finally, his voice barely audible. "We'll tell you everything. But it's bigger than just us." "Much bigger." Sarah nodded, unsurprised by his admission. She had suspected from the beginning that the pattern of disappearances at Preston Academy indicated institutional involvement rather than isolated incidents. Now she was finally going to get the truth about what had been happening to America's future military leaders. Her way: "At least make this easy on yourself." "Easy?" Sarah laughed, and there was something in the sound that made all 3 cadets take an involuntary step back. "Nothing in my life has ever been easy. Why would I start now?" She thought about the drill instructors who had pushed her beyond her limits, the combat missions that had tested every skill she possessed, and the teammates who had died believing in something greater than themselves. These 3 bullies thought they were ending her story, but they were about to discover that her real story was just beginning. "Last chance," Jake said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Jump now, or we throw you off." Sarah Martinez, former Navy SEAL and decorated combat veteran, looked at the 3 cadets who thought they could intimidate her into suicide. They had no idea what she was capable of, no understanding of the training and experience that lay hidden beneath her carefully constructed cover identity. "No," she said simply. "I don't think I will."